afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this discussion on AI and the customer experience, brought to you today by Pros. My name is Hamish Taylor, and it's my great pleasure to be moderating the discussion. I'll be perfectly honest with you, I've actually got a bit of a sense of relief around this one because I've been doing lots of CIO and CFO events recently. So it's nice to be back on home territory for once, as my journey into chief executive roles was dominated by driving customer centricity in traditionally kind of non-customer focused organizations. I mean, I started off in traditional consumer goods with Procter & Gamble. So if you want to lecture on toilet cleaning, by the way, I'm your person. Through consultancy with Pricewaterhouse, then moved into service businesses as head of brands at British Airways. And then was chief executive of Eurostar, the high-speed rail channel joining London to Paris and Brussels, attempting to get the French, the English and the Belgians to work together, which, as those of you that have studied European history will know, is not necessarily an easy task. I then took over as chief executive of Sainsbury's Bank, the world's first supermarket bank. And since then, I've been working as an advisor to organizations and a certain number of governments, but largely on this whole area of customer focus and customer experience, which is, as I say, I'm relieved to say is a lot of the topic for today. So to set the scene a little bit for the discussion, look, over recent years, we know that customer focus, customer first, customer centricity, whatever language you want to use, have become kind of buzzwords and phrases that every chief executive feels obliged to put on their list of values or their strategic priorities. But what does it really take to deliver great customer experience as opposed to just paying lip service to it? Because the delivery of a consistent customer experience, is challenging enough anyway, because you've got much more demanding customers than we used to have, wanting convenience, personalization, and many other factors. The pandemic, of course, led to more remote customers and changing business models. But I think perhaps the biggest challenge facing us all has been the rapid growth in new technologies and the accompanying explosion of available data. Gone are the days in the early 80s when in consumer goods, we had one computer per department and the data we got was about 2 months out of date by the time we got it. I think, though, probably the most exciting thing that's happening in that world of technology and the changes that are happening at the moment, of course, has been the advent of artificial intelligence, or AI. But with this comes the challenge of developing a competence in AI. So how can we make the most of the potential from it? And how do we make AI accessible for those who maybe don't have an in-house development team? Well, fortunately, I'm going to be joined by two experts to explore this world of AI and its link to the customer experience. My first guest is Nancy Rademacher. Now, Nancy is an international keynote speaker, and she has a particular focus on the impact of digitization on customer behavior. She comes to us today with 30 years of experience in marketing roles, in teaching computer science, consultancy with various organizations, including Microsoft, and then more recently with the innovation Kickstarters group, Nextworks. So Nancy, you're very welcome to the stage. Great to see you. And you've no idea what a relief it is to see your face appear before I get to the end of your introduction. So welcome to the stage.
Thank you.
Great to see you. And you're joining me from just across the water. I'm in Edinburgh in Scotland and you're over near Amsterdam somewhere, I believe.
That's right.
Good stuff. Well, listen, it's great to be having a conversation about customer experience, frankly. I'm delighted by this. So let's get into it. And let's start off at a general level then. It's as I said at the beginning, it's a kind of magical word that's used these days a lot. So why is it becoming particularly important at the moment, do you think?
Well, whenever I talk about customer experience as a keynote speaker, and that used to be on stage, until beginning of 2020, and it's still online now, although I must say I do get some live events now.
I had my first live event last week, actually. I had to remember to put a proper pair of trousers on because I'm sure you can put them here upwards,
Exactly. Well, I always like to start off by talking about how technology has brought about such a dramatic change. It hasn't just changed organizations, companies. What I believe to be more important even is that it has changed us as humans. Our human behavior has changed because of technology. And I think, as you mentioned, COVID-19 has even reinforced this. And so first and foremost, we need to understand the new human, this new customer, in order to make sure that we deliver what is necessary and what is expected from us. And I always like to talk about the 5 eyes of the changed human. So 5 characteristics that have either become more prominent or are definitely new because of technology. And those 5 are, first of all, we've become much more informed. So there's 4.5 billion of us on the internet, more than 5 billion of us with a mobile phone. And we have this constant stream of information running towards us. And one thing that companies need to realize from this, by the way, is that we find ourselves in this continuous state of information overload, where we have so many choices to pick from that we just don't know it anymore. And so that's one thing that companies need to deal with. Secondly, we've become much more individualistic. We have literally put ourselves in the center of our very own universe. And I think this is the most important one, why customer centricity has become so important. And the biggest metaphor, I think, for this individualism is the selfie, where we make this wonderful picture of ourselves in the center of the picture, and a celebrity or even a disaster as a mere background. Thirdly, we've become more impatient. So our span of attention has gone down from about 12 seconds at the beginning of the millennium to 7.6 seconds these days, which makes that we are officially beaten by the goldfish that has a span of attention of 8 seconds. So
mind you, if we're down to 6.5 seconds, I mean, presumably a 20-year-old must be down to about half a second.
Yes, well, not half, but I think they are somewhere around 5. It has to do with age. That's really very true. And so we don't like waiting anymore. We have become the swipe generation. We want to go through everything quickly. So you need to account for that as well. We've also become much more intuitive. And what I mean by that is that basically we've got a rational part of our brain and an intuitive or emotional part. And it's this part that's 40 times faster and that actually makes our decisions. But we like to justify our decisions as rational human beings that we think we are. So basically the rational brain acts as a referee, so to speak, keeping me from eating all the chocolate I encounter. But still, it's the emotional brain that does make the decisions. And since this rational brain is so full, overloaded with information, it's the emotional brain that kind of, prevails. And then finally, we've also become much more influenced, of course. There's, I think on average, globally, we spend 2.5 hours each day on social channels. And half of us have said that it has become even more because of COVID. And of course, these numbers vary. In the East, it's close to 4 hours. And in where I live in the Netherlands, it's just 1 hour and 15 minutes or so. So these 5 hours, I think, are very important to recognize that the customer has changed and that you need to understand this as a company. And that, because we have put ourselves in the center of our own universe, the lesson to take here is that you should not start with your product or service, but start with the customer instead. And that's easier said than done, to be honest.
Absolutely. Now, listen, a lot of the work that I've done with organizations was trying to encourage them, as you say, to start outside and work back. So what's the benefit you're trying to bring to your customer, and then design your product or service or customer experience on the back of that. So I get the bit about starting on the outside. Now, traditionally, when companies start on the outside, they'll write out a list of customer needs or the customer benefits as a result of their product. But you're talking about something slightly different here. You've talked to us about what's changed within the customer themselves. So if we now know what this new customer looks like, how can that help us change even further what we do with customer experience?
Well, I do believe that if you take these 5 elements, you can turn them into several aspects that you can do in order to improve the customer experience, because that's what it's, where it all starts in this battle for the customer. In my view, it starts with customer experience. I sometimes refer to it as the X factor of customer centricity, the CX. Now, because we're so informed, it needs to be all about simplicity. So become the curator of information, so to speak, and reduce the stress of choice for your customers. It's not about making even more choices available. It's about making available the right choices. I'll come back to that again. It's also about transparency. So transparency in security, where you store my data, in pricing, how you use my data, transparency in price, in pricing. So how do your fees come about? Be absolutely clear about that. And then transparency in sustainability. And what I mean by that is we used to have this zero-sum game where it was a question of either better for me or better for the world. And now it has to be about both. So there is also this certificate for B companies that are really taking this into account. So demonstrating to your customer how directly or indirectly they can become, so to speak, a better version of themselves because of your product or service. Now, the fact that we've become so individualistic means that it is all about personalization. There is no such thing as a one size fits all. If you look at gender alone, there are massive differences in shopping behavior, for example. So I think it has to be moving away from the mass towards the individual. And I don't mean personas here or segmentation. I really think it's about the individual. So it basically segments of one, so to speak. So it has to be about extreme personalization. And we'll get back to that later as well. And then this impatience that we have makes that you need to make it convenient and fast for your customers. So make it extremely easy to do business with you and have a fast delivery. And I always like to invite organizations to look on their inside. What are the processes or procedures that you can simplify for your customers? And that's something that they kind of forget to do. That's one way of looking at it, and it has to do with interfaces and stuff like that as well. And then because we're so intuitive, this emotional brain prevailing, so to say, it's all about evoking the right emotion. So make the experience a fun and pleasant one. I think adding this touch of humor is something that a large portion of organizations tend to forget. And then at the same time, it's also about recognizing emotions with your customers. And by the way, of course, it's all about this emotional connection that you can make as a human, but technology can help you out here as well. I sometimes refer to examples from companies like Interface or Affectiva that have technology that can, in real time, from your video, can recognize your emotional state. Or there's a company called Parallel Dots that will recognize emotion from your written words in a chat, for example. And there's sentiment analysis and socials and stuff like that. So all these things matter. And then finally, because we're influenced, I think it's important to create what I call Instagrammable experiences. So experiences that people want to share, not only on their socials, by the way, but also through word of mouth. So taking all of these elements, these new characteristics of the new human, and then translate them into these things to improve the customer experience. And by the way, this is not something that it has a status quo. It keeps on evolving. So you have to keep on monitoring this as well.
Well, look, I want to dig a bit deeper into one of the things you touched on a minute or two ago about technology, because you've used a lot of phrases and things that are about the human interaction, simplicity, transparency, personalization, evoking emotions, all that sort of stuff, And so these are kind of, it's a human experience. So could you tell me a little bit more about where technology fits with that? Because as a Luddite like myself, who comes from an age when, as I say, there was one computer in the department, I'm struggling to understand how for human experiences, technology can really make that bigger difference.
I'm from the same age as you, by the way, so I have that same experience. I think it's a great paradox, that, and it has been reinforced because we do more online business. So the paradox that technology will help us create a better human interaction. And on the one hand, I think this is basically by taking care of many of the repetitive tasks that people do. So it will help us focus more on what we humans are good at, which is creativity, human dialogue, passion, empathy, these things.
It's interesting you say that. It's interesting you say that, actually, because in a lot of the work I've done with finance departments in particular, that's the one thing they have noted is they've said, look, if I can get rid of the manual tasks with technology in my finance department, I can actually spend a bit more time on the strategic agenda rather than just being seen as the number counter. So
exactly.
In other areas as well.
Yes, but mind you, whenever I've done IT projects, what I found is that once they got rid of many of the repetitive tasks, they then started to cut down on personnel, and then you ended up with the same situation, right? So that's on the one hand, it's taking care of these repetitive tasks. On the other hand, I think technology will enable us to create these greatly personalized and convenient experiences as well. And so when I focus on convenience and speed at the same time first, I always use this acronym FAST, to illustrate that it has to be about speed, but it's also about creating a frictionless experience. So making it as easy as possible, taking away every possible friction. If you look at abandoned shopping carts in e-commerce, it's just amazing. If you would have those in a physical supermarket, you wouldn't be able to enter the supermarket anymore. People leave the carts there because the payment part of the website is
so it's difficult.
Creates too much friction. Let's put it that way. We see many things of these frictionless experiences, like pay with your phone. In China, I mean, the whole society is cashless. But easy identification through your biometrics, one-click purchases and stuff like that. So that's where technology can really help. The A for FAST stands for accessibility. And that is about opening hours. How accessible are you as a company? How well can your customer service department be reached? But it's also about these, what I call channel-less journeys. So where you have the channel becomes incidental and the experience becomes central. And so it requires a lot from the technology to take a conversation from one channel seamlessly to another one. And then it's also like the accessibility of the interface. How easy, intuitive is it to be used? And there is great room for improvement in lots of apps, I can tell you. The S stands for self-service. If you provide easy and intuitive self-service opportunities, if the customer has questions, a lot of customers will like that. So, and then the technology piece could be where you allow them to ask questions in natural language, just by talking to you and finding the right answer quickly. And there's great technologies there as well. And then the T actually stands for technology to make, use this wherever you can. So super fast delivery by drones, but also in service, chatbots, voice bots, and even ARIs, artificial reality identities that continue to become more sophisticated and understand people better. So these are, I would say, digital humans that you can design to reflect the soul of your brand, so to speak. And continuous development makes that these become more and more human-like. They show emotions, so to speak. They react in a tone of voice that reflects this emotion as well. And so all of these things together will help. And then it's also using technology to have a proactive service, like next issue avoidance, be ahead of the customer, so to speak. Before he calls you, you know what's going to go wrong or going to be the next question. So it's about creating these effortless experiences, I think. And it has been proven that if you do so, customers are more likely to continue being your customer. And then next to convenience and speed, it's also about personalization. And there, big data and AI, as you mentioned, will be extremely important. So personalized recommendations online, not just based on your demographics, but also on your past purchases, your website behavior, but also your current emotional state. So, for example, when Amazon had introduced the Halo last year, this wristband device connected to an app, they introduced this notion of continuously listening to your tone of voice. And with their algorithm, they could then deduct what your current emotional state was. So just imagine what it can do in order to improve the personalized recommendation even more.
So listen, I mean, when we talk about the customer and we talk about, convenience, speed, personalization as concepts, there's a tendency often to think about this in a kind of B2C type context. It's because we think of consumers as soon as we think about customer. Is there much of a difference between B2B and B2C?
It's a question I always get.
Yeah.
You probably do as well. I think that experiences have become very similar between the two. the boundaries are blurring, especially with this huge shift towards online, again reinforced by the pandemic. For me, all business has become H to H, human to human. I mean, you don't do business with an organization, you do business with people.
Yeah.
And so I think it's crucial that you know this person, that you're capable of creating what I called earlier this emotional connection. And I love this example of an app called Crystal Knows, which helps you to determine someone's personality ahead of time. So you can link this app to LinkedIn, for example. And then when I would be looking up, you, I would get your personality that is defined by this algorithm based on all the stuff that you posted publicly. And then it kind of also tells me how your personality relates to mine. But that's not it. It also gives you nudges on how to enter a conversation with you. For example, if I want to call you to discuss pricing, it will tell me exactly what the do's and don'ts are for this conversation. And so that I think that's a wonderful illustration of how business has become human to human, and technology can help in any aspect, whether it's B2B or B2C.
Okay, well, okay, let's take it that I'm convinced that we can start to use technology much more, and it really can do a big job in terms of getting that customer experience and all the kind of concepts you've talked about. I guess the difficulty for a lot of organizations is then how to get started and how to actually do it, particularly if they don't have a competence in that area. So one thing we'll do is let's bring Michael on stage to join the conversation and talk a little bit more about this. And please don't go anywhere, Nancy, because we really want you to stay with us and keep the conversation going. Please do. If anybody's got any questions for Nancy, by the way, do put them on the questions tab and we'll keep an eye on it and see if we can answer in the meantime. But while we're doing that, let's get Michael on stage. Now, Michael is the Chief AI Strategist for Pros. And he's going to talk to me a bit more about AI itself, how it impacts on CX and how we can get started. Now, a bit of background on Michael. He completed his PhD in biophysics at UC Berkeley before beginning his analytics career as a principal and then lead scientist at Lithium Technologies. And since 2018, as I say, he's been the Chief AI Strategist at Pros. And he's also done a wonderful job for us today by getting out of his bed at a ridiculously early part of the morning as he's joining us from San Francisco. Michael, good to see you. I'm glad to see you're still awake.
Good to see you too. Yeah, thank you for the introduction.
Great to have you with us, and thank you for joining us at this early hour, because I know your expertise is very much in the AI area and how it applies to customer experience. And I guess that's the next stage we wanted to go in this conversation, really, was it's enough to, it's good to know that it can help us. Getting started and using it's another thing. So let's start with your perspective on the current challenges in creating customer experience in the digital age, and then we'll get specifically to the AI questions.
Sure, yeah. But before I get into a little bit of the challenges, maybe we need to understand how to look at customer experience from a more simplistic way, right? I mean, I think thank you, Nancy, for the great introduction on this topic, right? We had the 5 I's, we had have to do things fast, right? So, but from an organization, this is like sometimes overwhelming, right? There's so which I did I miss? which one of the FAST did I miss, right? And then the way I want to look at customer experience is there is a simpler way, but this really comes from understanding that what makes an experience good, right? And to answer this answer to this question is actually fairly simple. You just have to deliver more than your customer expect, right? So in some way, right, customer experience can be kind of described by a very, very simple equation, right? C equals D minus E, okay? C stands for CX, customer experience, right? Is equal to the difference, right, of brand delivery and customer expectation, right? It's like delivery minus expectation, right? So basically what that means is that if your brand are delivering more than what the customer expect, right, then you're going to have a delighted customer. You're going to have a positive experience, right? But if your brand actually delivering, your customer expectations are here and your brand are delivering here, right, then you fell short. The customer is going to be disappointed, right? So this is actually a very simple equation, right? C equals D minus E, right? C is very easy to remember. Just one simple equation, right? Now, the thing is that brands, they have delivered their product and services for years or tens of years or maybe even hundreds of years, right? So they know how to deliver, and they know how to deliver that at a certain level, right? The challenge is this customer expectation piece.
Yes.
Right. So that is constantly changing. That actually, it fluctuates and it changes based on the customer's context, right? So how do we? The challenge is that how do we gauge this customer expectation, right? Now, when you actually have a in-person engagement, right? Humans are extremely good at doing this, gauging the customer expectation, right? We know when the customers are not happy, when they want something more, when they just like keep negotiating, when they wanted some discount, when they wanted some just a little perk here or there, right? Humans are extremely good at gauging this customer expectation, right? So that we can match this delivery to the expectation, right? So to give a kind of satisfied customer, right? And to even to some extent deliver a little bit more than what they expect to give them a delighted experience, right? Now, the problem, as Nancy had mentioned earlier, right, with the COVID, everything is shifted to online, right? So now you don't have a human, right? So how the challenge is that, like, how can you gauge this constantly changing customer expectation, right? And moreover, here's another challenge is that, like, once you're online, every brand start to look very, very similar. And aside from the logo or everything, right? Everything is experienced through a digital device, your tablet or your mobile phone, right? So brands experience start to look very similar to one another. So these are all create, I would say, huge challenges for the brand.
So okay, so lots of brands have made the move. Then they're all adopting new technologies. They're creating these websites and whatever. Then, so given the context that you've just described, how can organizations differentiate themselves then?
Well, I mean, so as I said, this digital shift created a challenge, right?
Yeah.
But this digital shift also, is a big opportunity, right? So digital is actually great for collecting lots and lots of data about the customer, right? So even though you don't have a human, right, engaging them in person, right, which is really good at gauging their expectation, right? You can get for data, of the customer's contacts, right? You have lots and lots of collect these data about what the customer have seen, what their click stream, how many times they come back, and all this stuff, right? So with that data, you can actually use those data to help you understand the customer, right? And the second is that you can also use it to train the AI, right, to actually essentially automatically gauge this customer expectation, right? So this is actually an area of where brands can differentiate, right? So artificial intelligence is actually a great tool for differentiation, in this world of, where everything is starting to shift to digital, right? So I think that, like, just to illustrate, the example of, I would say, like, Amazon, have one of the, they're a leader in online digital business, right? They've been doing that for many, many years, right? So one of the tools that they actually use to differentiate their online customer experience is this, artificial intelligence, right? So they certainly use their AI to personalize the experience. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of their recommender system, right? People who bought this also bought that. They're a very long name for this recommender system, right? So this is essentially a kind of AI that actually help personalize your experience, right? So personalization is actually, I would say personalization is one thing, right? But very often, customer need to spend some effort or some investment of their resources to get to that personalization, right? Whether it is shopping for the for the right product, right, or shopping for the right price, right? Customer want things to be the way they want it, right? They want things personalized, but sometimes that takes time, right? Sometimes that takes time to shop, time to look for the right things and stuff like that, right? So Amazons are using this AI to increase this personalization, but decrease this investment of customer resources to get to what they want, right? So all these, I would say, one-click checkout, and in fact, Amazon had been using these autonomous AI to power their robotics within their fulfillment center, so that item can be sorted and packaged and shipped faster, so they have to spend less time waiting for their product, right?
Yeah.
So so everything is I would say that reducing the effort is one component, right? But the other component is that you want to improve this personalization, right? So it's kind of a ratio, right? So you want a good customer experience, one that actually maximizes the customer personalization, right? But have minimal kind of resource or effort investment from the customer side, right? So I think that's using AI, is going to be a big key to how brands can actually differentiate themselves, and it makes a huge difference in the beginning, because the brands who have AI is going to be able to operate much more efficiently than those who don't, and be able to personalize their customer experience much more than those who don't. Yeah.
Okay, so right, we've gone from understanding why customer service is important and some of the things around personalization and speed and whatever from Nancy. You've described a world in which technology, websites became commoditized to a certain extent. You couldn't tell one website from another. Therefore, using AI helps you differentiate. So let's go to the next stage then. Let's assume everybody recognizes it's important and businesses accelerate the transition to digital and adopt AI. So what happens when AI then becomes commoditized and everybody's using AI? How do you differentiate then? And can the customer even know which AI you're using?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? So as we know, technology eventually all get commoditized. I mean, in the short term, it makes a huge difference between the haves and the have-nots, right? The people who have, access to, technology will make a huge stride. They'll win the market essentially, right? And those who don't have access to technology, basically, they lose out, right? But the thing is that technology always eventually get commoditized, because more people will, vendors and provide those technology and driving the cost down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's very important thing to very, very good that you asked this question, because the thing is that how do you regain that differentiation, right? Once the technology is commoditized, everybody's using AI, right?
Yeah.
So every brand is start again to look, technology eventually always level the play field, right? I mean, in the short term, they always kind of create disruption, right? Those who have and have not, right? Eventually, they always level the play field because everybody have access to same technology, right? So now I think the key really is to, everybody's using AI, but how extensible your AI is, right?
Right.
So an AI that's actually extensible, meaning that an AI that can be augmented by your proprietary data and proprietary algorithm that you use to understand your customer, right? What allow you to regain that differentiation, right? So I think that's the key point I want to say, that it comes down to your ability to use your own data, right? Your proprietary data, right? And your proprietary algorithm, right? So AI is great, right? But once everybody have AI, then one AI start to look like another AI again, right? Just like one website looks like another website again, right? So initially it makes a huge difference, when you go online versus when you don't, right? But when everybody's online, then everybody looks the same. So I think the next level would be, how do you leverage that? And this is actually where pros actually most of our AI are actually extensible, right? We allow customer to essentially feed in their proprietary data and even to use their algorithm to be ensemble. We call it ensembling. Essentially, it's a way to in machine learning to combine different models together, so they actually provide even more optimal customer experience. Right? So this is just to make this a little more concrete, right? For example, you have an AI that could personalize, right, the right product, recommend the right product at the right price at the right time for the customer, right? But if it doesn't actually know who this customer is, the fact that one customer, if I'm a customer who has been with this brand for like 10 years and you are a new customer, right? If it doesn't make that distinction, right, it may it could create a kind of say, well, I mean, is my loyalty worth anything, right? So the fact that if you allow this AI to be even extensible, right? If you could feed in even your for example your loyalty data, right? When the algorithm is smart enough to know, this is actually a customer who has a long-term customer, right? So maybe we can even give them a little more discount, right? So you can actually recreate that personal touch, right? It's not no longer. I think personalization is great, right? But everybody know that personalization is what a machine can do for you, right? How do you reinvent and recreate that personal touch when you don't actually are able to engage this person physically, face to face, right, in this digital world? So that is really key to the future.
So I mean, again, from what I'm taking from that is, we shouldn't look at AI as a replacement for everything we've done before. It's an extra way of understanding what's going on out there and understand, but your own proprietary data and algorithms or whatever in combination with AI is what's actually going to make you competitive.
Exactly, precisely. Yeah.
Okay, good, excellent, good. Right. Well, look, I'll tell you what. Let's bring Nancy back into the discussion. We've left her alone for a few minutes, so I think it's about time we brought her back in here. I've got some questions for you, but I mean, before we get on to my questions, actually, actually Jessica White's put a question on the questions tab, so I'll turn to that one first. And this actually, sorry, I haven't brought Nancy, and this one may go to Michael first, looking at the note, what she's actually asked here. She says, each customer, because you talk about expectations, Michael, and she says each customer will have different levels of expectations, although their experiences may be identical. How do you then prioritize improvements that will provide the most value to the most number of customers rather than just to a potentially smaller cohort of customers?
Well, this is where personalization comes in, right? So this, concept of hyper personalization, right? What Nancy called extreme customer personalization, right? Is really the segment of one, right? You really need to know what this one customer's expectation. You can actually do this at scale, right? Sometimes a lot of times when you say, well, when you personalize and individualize, right? These, you can't operate a business at scale like that, right? I mean, that's not true. I mean, you can't do that with human alone, right?
Right.
But with technology, like Amazon is able to personalize your experience, like no problem, right? You go to Amazon.com versus I go to Amazon.com. You see a completely different set of product shown to you versus me, right? And every one of us is different. Like it's not just like a big segment that people who look like Michael we will see this segment, right? It's really a segment of hyper-personalized segment of one, right? So you can actually gauge the customer expectation down to the personal level, right? And still, yeah.
What I took from this question, Hamish, is that it was asked as if you have to make a choice on which improvements you make. And I don't think that you need to make this choice anymore. So if you have these smart algorithms, and you can have them even smarter if you have, like Michael said, your proprietary data, combined with it, you can actually make sure that you deliver an experience that's tailored to this one customer. And it's not about making choices, improving for this group or improving for that group. It could be both at the same time. And I think that's what I view as the virtuous cycle of AI. If you have more data, you would have smarter algorithms. You can create better products or services, leaving happier customers, getting even more customers, which will in turn give you even more data. So it goes on and on and on. And I think this is what is the way of thinking that we have to kind of do from this moment onwards. It's no longer about choices for this group or that group. It's very good and personalized for everyone.
Okay. Right, thank you for that. And Jessica, do come back with give us an extra question if you want to, based on what you've just heard as the answers there. But in the meantime, I mean, I've got a couple of questions for you actually that I want to get into. Right, feelings. One of the things that I always talk to organizations about in terms of creating a competitive advantage, the benefit you get may come from the product specific, like Procter & Gamble, this soap powder will wash your shirt whiter than that soap powder, traditional product-led benefit. Then your next level up tends to be around, the customer experience. So Starbucks built a big business as much on being on every street corner and giving you Wi-Fi access just as much as the taste of its coffee, for example, or Apple made its computers easier to use. So I understand the customer experience bit, and that's where we've been talking a lot at the moment. The level above that, I guess, is how you want your customer to feel. at the end of it. And someone like Disney, for example, will talk about, creating magical surprises or whatever it's going to be. So where does the technology help us with that? I mean, can technology really, can you tell your AI, I want the customer to feel the following way, and it can actually do something about that? Who wants to go?
Maybe I'll take a stab at that. I think technology is actually getting there. Like this is actually, an area where AI and actually a lot of research has been, in emotional detection, right? I mean, I think certainly, Nancy talked about these wristband that could detect kind of people's kind of emotion from time to time, right? I think these are, so I think that, it comes down to what data do you actually have about the customer, right? So just take example for sentiment analysis, right? Sentiment analysis is a natural language process. It is an area of AI as well, right? I would say it's a sub area of natural language processing. Right. So detecting sentiment, right? It's a way to kind of see whether customers are either happy or satisfied or dissatisfied about something, right? And so that has always been very challenging, right? Because there are things such as sarcasm, right, that you can't really detect when you say something, and the word literally means something, but then you actually mean something the opposite probably, right? And then but that comes down to the fact that you don't have for example the tonal data, the tone of speech, that when you actually hear, when you read the word, right, when you don't, it could be said actually in a different way, in a tone that's actually a sarcastic way, or in a tone that's actually very genuine, right? Then when you have that tone data, right, then it becomes really easy to kind of detect sentiment, right? So whether you could detect emotion or the emotional state, right, it really comes down to what data you get from the customer, right? If you have the right data detecting the emotional state or the customer feeling, right, it's actually not challenging, so yeah, this is the more challenging part is actually getting the right data, or how to do that in a way that doesn't violate customer privacy.
Because there's always two parts to it though, isn't it? There's the detecting emotion, and then there's creating emotion as a target. This is, I want to delight a customer, for example, or whatever that emotion is as well. Nancy, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, that's what I said. It's about evoking and recognizing emotions at the same time. And I think what you mentioned, Disney, what they do so well is that they continuously monitor customer behavior. And so whenever you create an experience, it's not about, asking feedback. Can you give us, a score on a 1 to 10 scale or whatever? But it's actually looking at their behavior, which makes more sense. And I think this is one of the things that we can learn, is that because we are these emotional people, if you ask me a question on what would I like, it's my rational brain that will answer. And I know this from Disney. They asked, what would you like us to serve you for lunch in our theme parks? And people would say, oh, we would like fresh juices and smoothies and salads. And then what people actually ordered were, Coke and hot dogs and hamburgers. So you have to make sure that if you monitor this behavior also, during or after the experience. And of course, I agree with Michael. It is very sensitive from a privacy perspective, especially with GDPR here in Europe. But that will give you the right data. And I think this is what is going on. The technology is there, as he explained, to detect the emotion. It's now about getting the right data in there. And I think if it will benefit us as customers, we are willing to provide you with our data. That's the thing that I get.
Well, look, I mean, it's really interesting to say, because I've been talking for years about concepts like, moving up from product to experience to feelings. And obviously we've always talked about personalization and the best customer feedback is at the time they're experiencing it. It's not 3 weeks later when they fill in a questionnaire and whatever. And what I'm hearing from you guys is, the technology gives us the ability to do all of that now in a way that we couldn't do before at a much larger scale. And as you say, down to a segment of one person, which allows you then to create that personalization as well as the efficiency benefits. So, I mean, it does sound very, very exciting. Look, we're reaching the end of our time, unfortunately. As ever, these things could go on forever. But maybe I could ask you each just to finish off with a sentence, maybe each, about what advice you'd give people as they start embarking on this journey at the moment. What thought would you like to leave them with, either about how exciting it is or what to do first? Nancy, do you want to go first on that one?
Oh, well, it is exciting. As you can tell, it is my passion and it's really worthwhile diving into. I would say two things. First of all, it sounds pretty obvious, but always walk in the shoes of your customer and go out. There's too many people still busy with merely the inside of the organization. So that's one. The other one is you don't have to become an AI expert yourself. That's where people are sometimes, frightened. But keep educating yourself on all these wonderful technologies out there that could help you improve the customer experience.
Fantastic. And same question to you, Michael. Got a thought to leave people with?
Sure. I think that, there's lots of that I could leave, but I think that, if there's one thing, right, I would say collect lots of data about your customer, right? So that, because that's what's going to allow the AI to help you understand that customer expectation, right? So that you can actually, deliver either matching their expectation or more, right? Remember, CX is equal to delivery minus expectation, right? So without understanding that what their expectation is, right, you flying blind, right? You could deliver more or less, and you don't even know what the customer experience is and what they feel like, right? So part of it is to really understand that, and I think the first step, is to collect data, because data is what fuel these AI.
And you made that clear, I think, very clear, which is new to me actually in this conversation, has been this business about, your own proprietary data and algorithms or whatever actually plays a major part in this. You've actually been extremely well behaved, Michael, because you haven't been there telling us about pros all the way through, but you've touched on a lot of the stuff that they do. So I'll say it for you, okay? If you want to find out a bit more about it, or you want to learn a bit more about how you can get started, then pros are there to help you on your journey. So I'll say it, because I'll do the sales pitch for them, because they've been very good about not doing it themselves today. So listen, unfortunately, we do have to finish, or we're going to start losing people fairly rapidly, I think. So listen, Nancy Raidmaker, Michael Wu, thank you both very, very much indeed for coming on. It's been a real education for me. I've really enjoyed listening to it. If any of you want to find out a bit more about either get Nancy to come and talk at your organization about some of these concepts, or you'd like to talk to pros about some of the ways they can help you, there's contacts and thoughts and stuff in the chat box on this. So please do get in touch with them. And my last thought is just to say thank you very much to you, the listeners. You are all still with us. I'm looking at the numbers and it's the same number as when we started. So clearly Nancy and Michael had something of interest to say to you all. So thank you very much for listening in. I sincerely hope there's been some education there for you, or some thoughts that you can take away for your own organisation. Best of luck with it. I'm far too old to embrace it in the way that most of you guys will. So good luck in the future with it. And I shall look forward to monitoring your progress in my retirement or whatever in the future. But for the moment, thank you very much indeed for listening in. Thank you to Pros for sponsoring today's event and making it happen. Michael, Nancy, thanks again, and see you soon.